All right, guys, so yesterday we looked at what exactly a complex number was and how we got this I and what it means to have a square root of a negative number. All right, so today we're just expounding more upon that. All right, so first off, let's talk about when a negative sign is located on the outside of a radical. All right, what does that do? Well, all it does is it makes the entire value of the radical negative. Remember, I told you when we are finding a square root, we have to allow for the negative possibility and a positive possibility. Having this negative sign out here says, I want the negative number. All right, so let's just work this chart. Start over here on the right. The negative square root of 144. Well, the square root of 144 is 12, and we want the negative one. All right, negative square root of 121, negative 11, negative 10. I guess you guys can see the pattern here, right? Negative 9, negative 8, negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1. What's the square root of x squared? X. And then it says we want the negative one, so negative x. All right. This is not to be confused with when we have a negative sign under the radical. All right, notice two different positions, outside of the radical, under the radical. Two different positions, two different meanings. All right, anytime we have a square root under the radical, it's like saying the square root of -1, and we have a special notation for that. It's the letter I, meaning imaginary. Okay, so let's practice. We have a whole chart here. You notice it's the same numbers. Look, 144, 21, 100, all the way down to our x squared, all right? But notice how this is different. The square root of -144 is not -12. It's 12i, all right? Anytime we have a negative sign under the radical, we get to take it out and it becomes an I, all right? In fact, you'll hear me say frequently, we get to take an I out. It's one of the few times we get to be violent in math. All right, we get to take an I out. So square root of 121, take an I out. And then the square root of 121 is 11. All right, so let's do the same thing for all of these. Let's take i's out of all of them. So the square root of -100 is 10i. Negative 81, 9i. 8i, 7i, 6i, 5i, 4i, 3i, 2i, 1i, square root of -x squared. It's still x, but then I got to take the I out. So this is xi. All right, do you see how all of this works? Pay attention to the negative signs. I've said this many, many times in class. Those negative signs will kill you. They're out to get you. Do not let them get the better of you, okay? Pay attention to where they are. Outside of the radical makes it negative. Inside of the radical, take an I out. All right. So let's go down here and let's talk about simplifying radicals with negatives. All right, so first step, factor and simplify any perfect squares out of the radicand. Remember, that's the number underneath the radical sign. If a number on the outside of if a number is on the outside of a radical, multiply this number with any numbers you bring out front. If a negative number is in front of the radical, it stays out front, making the radical negative. Hang on. If a negative sign. If a negative number is underneath the radical, you must use an I because it's imaginary. This is where we're going to take an I out. All right, so we'll start with the first one. Square root of -24. Well, 24 doesn't have a square root. It does not a perfect square. So we need to factor this guy. So 24 we know is 4 times 6. Hey, 4 has a square root, right? Because it's 2 times 2. So we can factor out the 2. 2 comes out, 6 stays under, and we had this negative sign originally, so it makes our entire result negative. All right, so same thing for -50. All right, so 50 does not have a square root. It's 25 times 2, and 5 we know is a perfect square. 25 is, because we know it's 5 times 5. So we can take a 5 out. The 2 is by himself, he stays in. And then pay attention, negative sign under the radical, so we take an I out. All right, let's move down here. Let's get a couple examples where we have numbers on the outside. Let's look at this one right here, -5 times the square root of 25. Well, 25 has a square root, right? What's the square root of 25? It's 5. But then I already have a negative 5 out here. So negative 5 times 5 says that my answer to this is 25. So the negative 5 times the square root of 25 is negative 25. All right, let's look at the one to the left here. Negative 3 times the square root of negative 28. All right, 28 does not have a perfect square. It's not a perfect square. So let's break it down. So 28 is what? Well, that's 4 times 7, right? And 4 we know has a square root because it's 2 times 2. So we'll take a 2 out. So negative 3 times 2, the 7 stays in. And then pay attention, I've got this I under this negative under my radical sign. So when I comes out. All right, so then let's simplify this. Negative 3 times 2, negative 6, I radical 7. And that is my answer. All right, let's scroll down here and see if there's any other examples that we want to do. Okay, I think we're good on the front page. Let's take a look at the back. Actually, we already did this in the last lesson, so we don't need to do this again, all right? All right, just remember what it is, how it works, all of that. If you are puzzled on this, how this whole complex number 3 plus 2i thing works, take a look at the last video. All right, as always, email me if you have any questions, and good luck with your homework.